It's Barry from Jerusalem. This week's Parsha is Korach. Korach was Moses' nemesis. He wanted to take over his leadership. Moses, of course, for years led the people in the desert, and then here comes Korach saying, Kulanu Kodushim, we're all holy. How is it, my cousin Moses, do you take on this leadership role? Aren't we all holy? So, as we said in last week's Parsha of the spies, again, there was a leadership issue. And it actually, when Moshe was having difficulty with Yitro said, you're taking too much responsibility and it needs to be passed on to the elders. And that way your burden won't be so great. And there'll be more organization. So he said, but remember one thing, he said, remember, keep in mind, try to do the will of Hashem. Try to do the will of God. So when we come to this Parsha Korach, it's the same issue. In other words, human beings like to step forward and give their advice and give their opinions and say, I think I could do a better job. Don't forget, Moshe was in charge of hundreds of thousands of people in the desert. He was supposed to take them in the desert. And then when they went to go spy out the land, he should have just said, why do you need to spy out the land? He was upset. And Hashem said, why don't you, it's up to you. Why don't you do what you think needs to be done, survey the land regarding strategy or whatever it is. And one of the things he told Moshe was that the land was holy, was tov, it was good, and it was a land of milk and honey, which translates into like Tamar is like a fig. It was a plentiful land. The emblem of the spies coming in to the land was showing them carrying the big oversized grapes. It's interesting because the grapes are the fruit that we give at every major Kedusha, which is every major ceremony regarding a certain life cycle in the Jewish life cycle. For example, you get married, you say Kiddush. You have the Shabbos each week, you say Kiddush on the wine. The wine of the grape juice squeezed. So here, he knows that the land is good. Why didn't they just move forward? So the bottom line was, he saw that there were giants in the land. Well, if they didn't go into the land to begin with, they would have seen the giants, but had a different attitude. But because they saw the giants instead of the land as what it means to be good, it said the land swallows its inhabitants. The land swallows its people. There were giants were being buried as the little spies looked on, and they said to themselves, they said, we are grasshoppers in their eyes. So here we have a situation where God says the land is good, and they're commanded to go into the land and take over the 7 Canaanite nations, who are into negative things, that false idol worship and all these things that the God of Israel came into the world to teach all the nations, not just the Jewish people as this chosen, to educate the nations as to what God's will is and what it involves. What it involves in every leadership role, like in Moshe Rabbeinu's role, in Korach's role, is humility. And if we understand the Torah, we understand that the Torah to really get anywhere in the Torah and to learn anything in the Torah, you have to give up. You have to give up your ego. You have to give your koach. You have to give your strength in order to achieve. And the Torah says it's a very interesting step. He says you have to go backwards to move forward. So just when you think you're getting somewhere, you have to humble yourself. That's the only way you're going to move forward. So people of arrogant personalities or narcissistic or self-worshipping personalities, behaviorists say they want the complete control. So God says, you are my people. I'm giving you a job to go in the land. I'm telling you that you can go in the land and you will be covered. You will win. That's expressing the will of Hashem and making your will His will by having deep emunah. So what happened was, Korach challenged Moshe. And Moshe, in his humble way, said, listen, we'll see whose words are truthful. You get your men together. So he got 250 men, prominent men, who he persuaded because he was wealthy. He knew the secrets of Yosef had the hidden wealth from Mitzrayim, and he tapped into it. And to gain this leadership role, maybe he paid off the 250 men that said, Korach can do it, Moshe, we're with Korach. So how could it be that they go with this guy after Moshe had all the brachas behind him in the desert and in Egypt, and he took them out with miracles. God took them out. Now see, Moshe in the Passover Haggadah is not even mentioned. Why? He was just a tool. That's the humility. When you see yourself as a servant of a God, you're humble. That's the whole concept of being humble. In other words, there's no ego involved. If you're truly connected to the Spirit of God, then you're totally humble. You're just trying to figure it out. What does He want from me? I mean, I am an individual and I have freedom of choice. And He wants me to choose freedom, because that was the message coming out of Egypt. But was free to take drugs or to be addicted to things or just to not to be enslaved? No, it was to come out of your mitzarim, which is your narrow straits, which is your darkness, the darkness of Egypt, where they fell 49 levels to the lowest. And they heard their tortures and they heard their cries, and He released them out. So here we come into the land. They should be ready. But the majority said, we could. They cried. Only the minority, only Moshe, only Yeshua, Moses' assistant, and Caleb said we can do it. So we have to find the balance between what is our self-esteem, what is my purpose, what can I hope to achieve in this world, how do we bring God in this world to reach a certain understanding, and how do I create a situation of shalom, of peace, in my interactions with my fellow men. You sure don't do it with an ego. You sure don't do it with controlling behavior. You sure don't do it with narcissistic behavior. No, you do it with kindness. You do it with focus. You do it with a deep sense of mission. So Moses said in his humility, you bring your 250 pans to this place, and I'll bring my offering, and we'll let God decide what's the emes, what's the truth, because the Torah is the purpose of truth. The idea is for the Jewish people to reach a sense of high level of purity, to get rid of all the impurities associated with idol worship, non-kosher food, not keeping the Sabbath. If you're a Jew, you're commanded to keep the Sabbath. That will ignite that inner light. And that inner light is your light for yourself. And once you ignite that light for yourself, then you can be a light to others. But if you have low self-esteem, if you don't have a good image of yourself, then you can't be a light to others. That's the whole purpose of being chosen to be a light. But the non-Jews look at it as, oh, you're chosen, like you're special. No, we're chosen to help you. Because if you don't allow us to do our job as a light to the nation, then you're going to suffer at the next revelation. And there is in the Talmud a mention between 6,000 and 7,000 years, we're close to 6,000 years already, that there's going to be another redemption. But not for the Jewish people. This is for all the nations. And everybody that's against the Jewish people is going to be in trouble. And right now you see it. You see it in America, you see it in Europe, you see it everywhere. You see the Jews are getting a little bit agitated by the non-Jewish element, the prejudice, the ego. They don't have the light of the Jewish spirit, Jewish soul, and their light is dark, and their understanding and their wisdom is foolish, because they realize that if you leave the Jews alone, if you leave them be who they are and why they were created, and after 3,000 years they're still speaking this message, and it's the unity of the Jewish people that will actually be the light for the 70 nations of the time after the destruction of the world in Noah's time. They said there were 70 nations that came off that, from that rebuilding of the ark, where God destroyed the world. He's not going to destroy the world. You don't have to worry about that. He had the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is that we live. The Jewish people will live. We get tried in every generation, but we live. So what happened was, Korach came, put your pans down. And what happened? The land opened its mouth. Didn't we hear something like this in last week's Parsha? The land swallows its inhabitants. But how the same in the same text in this week's Parsha Korach is the same language. And what was the sin of the spies? Was it they spoke lashon hara on people? Did they speak bad talk on the people? No. They spoke bad talk on the Holy Land. So here in this week's Parsha Korach, the land opened its mouth. The land can't talk. But it's a very interesting midrash that says, because there's hope for Korach, because Korach was a chacham, he was a smart guy, but he was too smart because he was for his own ego, for his own power, and not to have the foresight to see that Moshe Rabbeinu and his successor Yeshua, Joshua, is his main focus now. It's not Moses. It's following the plan of Sinai, which was the 10 Commandments, which was for the Jewish people, it was 613. For the non-Jews, it was 7 laws of Noah: not to kill, not to steal, not to rape, all these things, not to covet. So we have to understand that lashon hara is a very serious thing. And because on this day, the 9th of Av, where they went into the land, in last week's Parsha, the spies, that it was decreed in heaven in the future that both temples would actually be destroyed more than 500 years apart. How can it be? Don't we have Bechira? We do have Bechira. Bechira is the freedom of choice to improve our condition, to improve the lives of our brothers and sisters, to unify ourselves as a nation, to unify the nations in the world, to see that it's better to work in a peaceful situation rather than to take positions of power where there's arguments and disruptions that create sometimes terrible situations, terrible scenarios. But in this scenario, the land ate up the followers of Korach. And it said that there's one midrash that says you can hear them say, Moshe is true and his Torah is true. So all the lies that we're hearing today from different parts of southern Israel and the neighbors, remember these words of Korach's men, that it really said they didn't die. They're still alive. And if you go to this place in the land of Israel and you put your ear down to where it happened, there's a tradition that says Moshe's Torah is true. It's emes, it's truth. Moshe is true and his Torah is true. So all I'm trying to do is put out the message of Moses. Not that I'm anything like him. Moses also, he didn't merit to come to the land. Or did his brother, or did his sister. So I believe in the building of the third temple, I believe that they will be reincarnated and they will come into the land. But we're limited in our understanding of the what's happening right in front of our faces. Forget about this world and the next world and the next day. But we have to have faith. We have to be nice to one another, and we have to put God before our egos, and we have to be committed to fulfilling the positive and the negative mitzvahs as Jews, on the basic mitzvahs of just being nice to one another. Not to kill, not to steal, not to cheat, not to commit adultery, whatever it is. It's all connected. So I give you this Parsha Korach, where also the Shabbos is Tammuz. In Tammuz, we have a fast day. It's not like Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av, which is 24 hours. It's a day fast. And because it was on Tammuz, at this period, that the second temples were breached on the fast of Tammuz. So that's coming later on in the month, and it was a period where not so many nice things happened between that time and Tisha B'Av, which was both temples were destroyed. So even though it's a time of being cautious and not so happy, there were no real holidays in between. Rosh Chodesh is a holiday. It's a refresher course. It's a renewal of the month. We have to just be positive, move forward, and when the time comes for the redemption, we should all be ready for it, embracing the miracles coming to mankind. It should come soonly in our days, and we should all have a very happy Shabbat. Barry from Jerusalem.